All right. Good even fall to one and all, and good even fall to that one listener out there in the great, the vast cosmos of this interstellar space that we all float in. This vacancy that is everything but. This is your interlocutor, Warp Speed, and I do bid you do well. I hope you are well of health and sane of mind, and I really do appreciate every single one of you that will be hopping on and entertaining us with questions, because if anything, that's the one thing that I have: questions. I don't have much answers, but I can always promise you I will have questions for you. Mr. Vince Vargas, good even fall to you, sir. And thank you very much for hopping on in this your live. Even though I went late, hopped on. I had a couple of things that I wanted to just hash over. I was reading a couple of late reports in the boxing news of the day, and I found a couple of things interesting, but yet I'm not astute and knowledgeable enough to formulate too many strong opinions or rather good conclusions regarding some of these matters. So I just figured maybe run these things by you guys and see if you guys can tell me where the chips may lay, right? So tonight, all I propose is just to go live quickly and just go through a couple of reports that I found to be very interesting, and I hope you also found them to be interesting once I read them by you. Now, as you all may have heard from last night's live, I missed a lot of boxing. That's a novelty. That's a quite rare event when I don't have time to really just sit down and watch these warriors, both men and women, pummel each other, beat each other's brains down. It's rare that I miss a good scrap. But I did have a son of mine have a baseball game and photos. We had a daughter who was playing tennis match. We had another son who had a fight. He's a boxer. So I was just running up and down the city of Salinas, California, the salad bowl to the world. And I got to see Ryan Garcia fight Devin Haney. And I got to see the very first Roblox event. For those that don't know what Roblox is, it's a very generically drawn, blocky style of video games that is very popular. Nonetheless, they had the very first Roblox boxing event, and I was able to sit down with my 10-year-old son before we headed out to his baseball game, and we watched these fights. And it was a fun little affair. If anything, boxing brings my family together. But I did miss a lot of boxing, so last night I was just trying to ask you all, what did I miss? What did I miss? And I guess maybe I should ask you, Mr. Vargas, what did I miss last night? Or better yet, Saturday night, right? We had a couple of good fights, and Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia's pay-per-view. I know that we had Arnold Barbosa coming out for his first performance under his new promoter, and Oscar De La Hoya for Golden Boy. And he fought this very skillful southpaw fighter from Ireland. And man, oh man, that guy seemed to be giving that guy trouble from the get. Okay, all right. He seemed to be trouble from the get. And I was able to see just a couple of rounds of that fight before I headed on out, because my wife needed to buy a Johnny roll, is what they call it, a sushi roll. So I said, all right, Arnold Barbosa, I'm sure he'll figure this guy out. Then we were headed on out to buy her sushi. My son came out victorious, so he wanted the sushi. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm just going to miss on these fights, and I'm likely going to miss out on Ryan Garcia. But no, they were considering enough to eat very quickly. in order for the warp speed to gather around with his other family members and sentient beings in order to watch the pugilism. And I did see one of the most surprising boxing fights that I've seen for a very long time. The most significant fight that I can think of that every amateur boxer, every aspiring boxer should have watched. A fight between what many consider the no-hoper, a gifted and talented individual in Ryan Garcia, but lazy as heck, versus one of the hardest working, most humble, and skillful fighters there are, Devin Haney. And what I tell everybody, if anything, this sport is the sport of a puncher's chance. And one thing we do know about King Ryan Garcia, is that he has a heck of a punch. And yep, it was proven there. Surprises, surprises, surprises. Mr. Vince Vargas, how do you do? He states and says boxing does not have a judging problem. Us fight fans are used to it. Yeah, you may be right. Yeah, actually, maybe if there was no judging problems and no controversies, perhaps the world of boxing might not be as exciting and entertaining. I mean, God knows it to be true that homie Ricky and I, we actually discuss boxing every day of our lives because of the fact that it always provides something for us to either bicker about that we find controversial, so forth and so on. What would boxing be without the controversies? I guess is really what Mr. Vince Vargas is bringing out. There is no problem, is what he's trying to say. Barbosa didn't impress the fans. A lot of booing. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you got a fighter in Arnold Barbosa who is himself a skillful fighter who likes to come in and be an aggressor, but he's never really fought a mover. And man, that Irish kid, he was quite a mover. And he had very good countering skills, and he was just rangy and tall, and he presented all kinds of problems for the men from Los Angeles. Boxing is perfect the way it is, the homie Ricky states, and I guess he's in complete agreement with what Mr. Vince Vargas hints at, that there is no judging problem. Well, gentlemen, what would you say if I was to tell you one of the most important, most powerful individuals in the sport of boxing thinks we may just have to work around a couple of issues regarding the way we judge boxing because he wants it to be better? Okay, Mr. Mauricio Suleiman, the head at the WBC, the World Boxing Coalition or what, he says that he would like to have a buffet of 6 judges for the very first 4-belt division undisputed heavyweight fight between Ukraine's Alexander Usyk and the UK's Luke Tyson Fury. 6 judges, guys. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about one judge judging the fight? Right? We know that most fights that aren't big events, the 4-rounders, 6-rounders at times, they just have one judge. They can't afford to pay 3 judges for a little fight that really doesn't draw much attention, may not be significant, just judged by one guy. Well, I've seen that happen. But 3 judges apparently is still so controversial, even though 3 judges almost cover all 4 sides of the squared ring, right? And you would say from those vantage point, one guy can focus on one side, the punches that really land clean, the ones that he may miss are the ones that are going to be thrown and landed when the fighter is at his back, probably obstructing that view. But then there you go, you have another judge and another one of the sides of the squared ring to capture the action accurately where one may have missed it, right? And that's one of the reasons why I don't really criticize the judging too much, because from the vantage point of one judge, he may miss a lot of the action. That's why you may get all these different cards to say one judge gave it for this guy, the other guy gave it for that guy. God knows I've seen a lot of amateur fights myself where I thought one fighter won it, but then we have another spectator like myself who's watching something else, and we come together and we discuss it, and then we compare what footage, and now we're understanding each other, right? So I'm not too critical about judgment. In fact, I'm a very simple individual. This is the way that I judge fights. If you are a mover and you take steps back and laterally, you're not what they call a ring general. You're a retreater. You're a person that's relinquishing the real estate. If it was up to me, judging would be judged on the four criterias. Ring generalship would not be who, quote unquote, controls the ring by their movement. No. Ring generalship means who's the guy who's taking over the ring. And by that, I don't mean moving backwards. By that, I mean moving forward, like conquerors and pirates and marauders tend to do. They take over by forward action. In other words, the fighter that walks another man down, he gets one part of the point. What's the second part of the point? Punches landed, right? There you go. Quite simple, right? We don't have to consider clean, effective punches. If you're throwing punches, you're throwing punches. If you're landing them, you're landing them. Simple as that. I don't find boxing that circles around or retreats, quote unquote, beautiful, and especially not the sweet science. The sweet science is just a term invented by these snobby guys that like to look down on you like if you're nobody, like if they're savants and holders of secrets that the commoner has no knowledge about. Nah. We know a good scrap and we know a good fighter when we see one. And in real life, if you take a step back, you are retreating. Quite simple. But Arnold Barbosa, I guess, somehow eked out the win in this fight that Mr. Vince Vargas says he was being booed in. A lot of people are saying that Arnold Barbosa lost and it was a blatant robbery. Hey, who knows? I only saw about 3 rounds from the beginning, and then I had to go get my wife some sushi. You tell me. But Mr. Mauricio Suleiman thinks 6 judges for the very first 4-belt undisputed heavyweight match makes sense. Mr. Bob Arum, one of the players that has to do with the maneuvering of one of those fighters, in this case Luke Tyson Fury, he disagrees. So before we get onto their comments, let's see what these gentlemen had to say. The homie Ricky says, I say this is a judge having it as a draw if it's possible. 6 separate scorecards, 6 different views, or 2 judges sitting near one another judging it from the same perspective. Who knows, homie Ricky, there's so many different ways to look at it, right? 4 sides, 4 judges. Where are the other guys watching it from? Maybe an overhead cam view, maybe from an angle more low lying so that they're maybe panning upwards. Not too sure. Maybe 5 judges is better than 6, right? Because 6 still allows for, guess what, a draw. Guess what a draw means? A rematch. Maybe we should have it odd numbers so that the likelihood of a draw gets reduced even more, because at the biggest stakes in the sport of boxing, which is in fact the undisputed fight, we should not risk any kind of draws. If we invest so much time and money to make these fights a reality, let's get, if possible, a clear-cut winner. The homie Ricky states, Ryan knew he should have gotten a neutral ref, not a black ref. Had Ryan chosen that Latino bald dude from Texas, Ryan gets a KO or stoppage. Yeah, you're talking about uh, Caiz Jr. Yeah, maybe. He's a fair one. He don't play around either, homie Ricky. Mr. Vince Vargas states reportedly broke Haney's jaw. Just seen that on YT. Yeah. Heck of a fighter, that Ryan Garcia. Heck of a fighter. And guess what? Heck of a fighter for Devin Haney, who kept getting up and up, getting dropped, getting his jaw broken apparently. And Ryan Garcia, all it took was one shot right to the solar plexus, and he couldn't get up. Even though just a week ago, the gentleman that you see before you, that fighter right there, that guy's name is Jordan Gill. He got bodied at the hands of Selfa Barrett. He got dropped 3 times in total, if I'm not mistaken, twice to the liver, and he kept getting up. Ryan Garcia, the first time he got hit to the body, he looked at his corner and said, yeah, no mas. Devin Haney, ladies and gentlemen. For whatever you want to say about him cheating and whatnot, one thing he does have is heart, and he has no quit. Mr. Vince Vargas states, these are weird scorecards that make us scratch our heads. It seems like the fans never had a say in who gets selected and who these people even are. Yeah, no, it's we don't. And in fact, the fighters themselves have a lot to say about who gets to judge a fight. We know Mr. Money Mayweather had his preferred judges. We know Canelo. I don't know if Canelo really has a guy that he relies on too much. But yeah, Money Mayweather and some of the other fighters, they always used to put those kind of conditions before taking a fight, that they would get to choose the third man in the ring. The homie Ricky states about how they gave Canelo a card over Mayweather. That was corruption. Yeah. Well, I don't know. You know, I thought that it was a very dominant win. In fact, the most clear win of Money Mayweather's fights in years. But I guess somebody had it a card in favor of Canelo. Who knows? 12-12 didn't surprise Mr. Vince Vargas. Brian made this fight much closer than it should have been by running away and turning his back, giving his booty up to the young Devin Haney. And that point deduction hitting that break was dumb, but it didn't cost him at the end. Got lucky. Yup. Ryan Garcia, the despicable individual, once they're separating him, the savagery comes about him, this fury, and he throws one of the cleanest punches that he threw in the whole fight. And it was as the third man was separating him, and boom, somehow, that's the one punch that Devin Haney took the best. Crazy. This is when I exit speed because I don't care about your explanation of how fights should be scored. Yeah, well, good riddance to you, the homie Ricky. Good riddance to you. I'm here to ask questions because I didn't watch these things. So if you have answers, I'm all for it. But if you're just here to criticize, yep, you can skedaddle, and we'll battle another day. So, Mr. Mauricio Suleiman, right? Let's look at this. Mauricio Suleiman, 6 judges. Let's see what we discover here. Here we go. As of 6 days ago, ladies and gentlemen, as reported on their Sky Sports Boxing, their website, entitled WBC President Explains New 6 Judging Scoring System Proposal. Now again, that's the key term right there. Proposal. Right? Because it's nothing written in stone. Nobody's saying that this is exactly what's going to happen. But apparently, that's what he is trying to convince these guys of doing. Oh, goodness. Why are they doing this to me? He states the following. There is resistance to change and heavy comfort leaving things as they are and being traditionalist, even though We have seen so many fights with split decisions in the last 6 months, and a high caliber judging making 116, 112 for one fighter and 116, 112 for the other. Just last weekend, he talks about a fight that just took place a couple of days ago, right? The reason for having six judges is to have more information. The more judges there are, the less possibility of bad scoring. That is the reality. If 4 or 5 out of 6 see one winner, then it is more concrete than a split 3. Okay. All right. So what this gentleman states is that if there's 6 judges instead of 3, then there won't be such a divide in their opinions, right? Because it'll be more of a democratic form of judging, right? The majority trumps the minority. But can't we say the same thing about a system of judges of 3? I mean, in most fights, there's a winner because 2 people judge in favor of one fighter, and one may have a split in the favor of the other. And guess what? That's still 2 judges over 1, which is still a democratic split. In other words, the majority rules. If you make it 6, the probabilities of a difference of opinion get increased. This is why playing the lottery is one of the most impossible and improbable things that can happen to an individual to win it, right? That's why when you have, let's say, if you were to have a lottery based off just one correct number, it's quite easy to win, right? If you had 2 numbers to get right in order to win the lottery, it's much harder than one number, because 2 creates a multitude of combinations of numbers that you just can't get with the 1. Now you increase it to 3, and then that, of course, just decimates even more so. 4 numbers, now you're talking very unlikely odds, high odds of anybody winning that pot. 5, you're talking incredible odds in the millions. 6 numbers, like the Super Lotto is in the United States of America. Really, it's hundreds of millions of people putting their money week after week before anybody wins it. That's hundreds of millions of people selecting hundreds of millions of different numeric combinations. You catch my drift. The more people there are, the harder it is to get things right. What Mr. Mauricio Suleiman is proposing is that somehow, if you have 6 judges over 3, there will be 4 people that see the fight the right way, or a more dominant, less controversial way. I disagree, right? There might be 2 people that see it a split, right down the middle. There might be 2 people that see it in favor of one fighter. There might be 2 people that see it in the favor of the other fighter. There might be 4 people that see it as a draw. And one guy splits for the other one. The other guy chooses the other one. What do you do there? Is it a majority draw? And isn't a draw a person that can't really make up their mind on who won? Right? Did he miss a punch? Is that why he couldn't give one round to one guy in order to not have it split? Then why doesn't Mr. Mauricio propose something different? Why don't we make fights 13 rounds? So that there ain't no way that there will be any odds that will be even, odd numbered, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 just makes it so there could always be a draw. If you make it 13 rounds, you're making it much harder for there to be a draw. So this is where we get into these questions of whether being a traditionalist boxing system is the right way, or if maybe boxing, especially for the bigger fights, needs some kind of a revamping. I'm not too sure. I'm just asking questions. Mr. Vince Vargas says three judges for big fights should be Mike Tyson, Marcus, and Sylvester Stallone. Need a celebrity judge. Yeah, yeah. Maybe this way it won't be so easy to offend these people, right? These judges, a lot of the times we don't know anything about them. We just know how corruptible they are, but we don't know who they are at the end of the day. Mr. Sylvester Stallone, Mike Tyson, Juan Manuel Marquez, guess what? They have reputations to uphold. They still want to be seen favorably in the eyes of the people. They would try very hard not to be corruptible. They would try very hard to get their judging right. You may be onto something, Mr. Vince Vargas. You may be onto something. And should have Xboxers that know the fight game. You know what, Mr. Vargas? I think you're a genius. I think you're a genius. And I think that has actually been proposed, if I'm not mistaken. But the reason why that has never actually been implemented, Mr. Vargas, if I'm not mistaken, I think I read that a while back, is because boxers will tend to judge according to their own particular fight style, right? So, in other words, they will be biased because they're going to resort to judging based on the fight style that they had, right? If they were a come forward aggressor, they're going to always appreciate the come forward aggressor because they identify as such. It's going to be hard for a come forward aggressive fighter working as a judge to pick a guy that just pot shots and retreats, pot shots and retreats, circles around and throws a jab here and there. He's not going to respect that. And I think maybe that's the reason why not many people validate it. Those judges can feed off the fans. They see what everyone is seeing in the arena. And that's the other thing, um, Mr. Vargas. Even though they can be swayed because of the commotion going on with the fans, even that could be something that can lead to a bias, right? Because let's say that, for example, most of these fights take place at their favorite fighters' backyard because they're the A side. You know, Money Mayweather brings his foes to Las Vegas. You have a Filipino from the Philippines coming to Las Vegas. Guess who the favorite A side fighter is going to be? That's going to be Mayweather. Guess who the people are going to cheer for? Of course, the American. So a good judge cannot be swayed by the clamor and the commotion of the fanatics. They have to see what's taking place in the ring without any kind of compromise due to the emotional state of the people going crazy over their favorite fighter getting a punch in. So they have a very challenging job. They really do. So judging is not easy, but I'm just asking whether six judges instead of three is any better. Why not 10? Why not one? Why don't we just put sensors in the punching gloves of the fighters so that whenever the sensors are triggered by a good blow, we can determine and quantify whether that was a clean and effective power punch. Maybe we have some kind of, I don't know, some kind of a device that can detect on what part of the body a punch landed. In other words, to try to gather the information that would indicate that the punch was landed flush and if it was a harmful punch to their opponent. There's all kinds of questions that we can ask them about how to make it easier to judge. I know that one of the things that's being implemented, believe it or not, is artificial intelligence or technology. Uh, Multiple cameras set up in different areas of the ring that are indiscernible to us, but that they're basically capturing all the 360-degree angles of a fight in order to catch every single thing, and then those computers start to amass all the punches that that the AI text to have landed flush, and then that creates that kind of judging system that does not require a human touch, a human compromise, human error. There's that right there. There's many different things, but maybe like you stated, right? Maybe like you stated earlier on. I think you said boxing does not have a judging problem. Us fight fans are used to it. Maybe we boxing fans, we'd like to criticize, but we wouldn't have it any other way. Maybe we love the controversy of bad judging. Who knows? Do you want computers to judge a fight and get it right? Maybe that is the way forward. But maybe it would also make it so that we are no longer as emotionally attached to the sport, because God knows that this sport moves us to our core. Mark is giving extra points to his countrymen. Yeah, you say LOL, but you're probably absolutely right. The only countryman he wouldn't give any kind of credit to, Mr. Viz Vargas, can you guess who that is? One fellow Mexican that he wouldn't give any kind of credit to. I think you know who that is. Gloves should light up, measuring impact. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Gloves spark when a KO happens. Man, you are a genius, Mr. Vargas. I'm telling you, you're really thinking like, because I work in with IT, right? It's those kind of ideas like the ones that you're proposing that IT guys find curious, and curiosity is what motivates these guys to experiment with advancing different technologies. Those things that you're bringing up might seem funny and frivolous, but I tell you, someone's looking at that and thinking, that's not a bad idea. Gloves start smoking after a 5-6 punch combo. Okay, now you're just being funny. Okay, so there you go, guys. 6 judges, right? And this was Mr. Bob Arum's retort to Mr. Suleiman, right? I wasn't really too content with Mauricio's response for why 6 judges over 3 makes any sense. But this is what Mr. Bob Arum, Top Rank CEO and Fury's co-promoter, stated. You don't put in something like that for the first time dealing with a major fight from the standpoint of visibility and importance. Maybe 6 judges are better than 3. I doubt that, but maybe. Nobody knows because it hasn't been done. But at least you experiment with that in fights that are not as prominent. With all due respect to my friend Mauricio, who's a really good guy, loves the sport of boxing, and has done a great job with the WBC, I wouldn't do it for this fight. I wouldn't say that you don't experiment with it for another fight. I don't believe the judging becomes better because you have 6 judges rather than 3. And of course, this report and boxing scene written by Manuk Okopian, he states that Mr. Suleiman believes that if more judges scored the fight, there would be a less probability of silly and controversial scorecards should a judge have a bad night. Okay. Again, we just discussed how once you add another layer of opinionation, another variable, the probabilities of getting things right become reduced even more so, because the numbers don't make it right. Now, the way that Mr. Mauricio Suleiman is sort of thinking is like this. When Devin Haney fought my favorite fighter, Vasily Lomachenko, Vasily the Matrix, High-Tech Lomachenko, everybody came out in the streets and started saying, robbery, robbery. Devin Haney robbed Lomachenko. About 80-90% of pundits, reporters, and the fan base stated on the polls that the Ukrainian had been robbed. Okay, that's what Mauricio Suleiman is thinking. That the bigger the numbers are of the judges, they would more likely represent the mass numbers of the population that tends to have an opinion formulated after they watch a fight. Good even fought to you, David V. Bring the judges from Dubai, they won't be biased. Yeah, well, I'm not too sure about Dubai. I think from Saudi Arabia, right? Because in Saudi, uh, if you do things wrong, there's some serious consequences. And Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, is a very wealthy country. And you know what people would do for money? They'll do everything for money, even lie and cheat and steal. But in Saudi Arabia doesn't need to do any of that. I'm not saying nobody lies or cheats or steals, but when you're wealthy uh, to the brim of your hat, yeah, you don't really need to do the extra things just to make a buck. And speaking of Saudi Arabia, ladies and gentlemen, did you hear the big news? His Excellency, His Excellency, and yep, I do say that proudly, His Excellency Turki Alalsheikh. He's making the very first United States of America Saudi Arabia promoted event starring none other than former two-time undisputed American welterweight and junior welterweight fighter Terence Bud Crawford, fighting an undefeated Israel Madrimov, the guy who many people are touting as the next Triple G. If you think that's not a great fight, let me just throw another one in there. Andy Ruiz. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Andy Ruiz. The Mexican American, or Mexican, or maybe Chicano. I'm not too sure how he identifies, but I believe he was born in the United States of America, so I know for a fact that he is an American. But Andy Ruiz Jr. is coming out of his 2 or so year hiatus to fight none other than Jarrell Baby Miller. Wow. If that's not enough, Isaac Pitbull Cruz is apparently to be pit against Jose Rayo Valenzuela, the man who beat the black Mexican Chris Colbert, the New Yorker, feisty fighter. Yup, Rayo is apparently gonna be pit against Pitbull. Wow. And this gets only better, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it only gets better if you're from the Golden State of California. Why? Because all of these incredible fighters are being brought to us by Mr. Turki Alalsheikh to come and fight in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. I'll tell you one thing. I don't go to many boxing events from pros because I find nowhere better than to watch a fight than right there in the comfort of my home, surrounded by my loved ones, as I crack open a jarrito and I make a couple of Central Coast style warp speed tri-tips. Yup. If you had one of those, you know what I mean. Tri-tips, jarritos, boxing, family. Nothing beats that. But I will make an exception, and I will take that 4 or 5 hour drive to the city of Los Angeles to catch these fights in person and to display my support and approval of what the athletic ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Turki Al-Sheikh, is doing for his country and its athletic department, but also for the world at large by opening up the world of boxing to all these impossible fights that only seemed like a dream. You want to talk about another impossible fight? What would you say if I was to tell you that Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh, he's also talking to Jerron Boots Hennis so that he could fight Terrence Bud Crawford? Are you not entertained? Ladies and gentlemen, my nation, the nation of the red, white, and blue, the nation of the eagle, we are divided. There's a lot of people resenting one another because of politics, our leadership, our policies. When I look at what Turki Al-Sheikh is doing for his people, I say, man, why can't we have a Turki Al-Sheikh? Where's our Turki Al-Sheikh? And I don't just mean, what he does for the sport of boxing. If you know anything about Turki Al-Sheikh, he does a lot of great things for his people and his country. In fact, he's doing so good that he's now doing things for others. He's a great leader. And I'm not too sure we here in the United States has it so bad that we have to look abroad. But sometimes, we just have to be curious to say, do we really have it as good as others? And I'm not too sure what Saudi Arabia is like. But I do know one thing. When it comes to a good leader, Turki Al-Sheikh seems to be the guy. I respect Turki Al-Sheikh. I want every single fight to be made, and guess who does also? Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh. Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh is the biggest, most powerful boxing fan in the world. And we're just so lucky that he loves this sport as much as we do, because the only reason these fights are happening is because he neither cares for the money, nor does he have any bias because of skin color or nationality or language or creed or idiom. It's because he really wants to see these fights happen. He really wants to see who comes out on top. He wants to see the best fight the best. And he has the means, the wherewithal to make it happen. The sport of boxing is in a much greater place because that man is the thing, because that man is alive. Turki Al-Sheikh is an incredible person. And if you research more about Turki Al-Sheikh, what he's gone through, what he's going through, you're going to see that he's the person that you can rally behind and say, that guy, we need that guy around. Turki Al-Sheikh. And just to wrap up this year live, guys, I'm just trying to ask you guys, right? I need you to tell me, what did I miss? Again, I just expressed to you all how I had a very busy weekend. I really didn't get to see much boxing. I only saw the most important fight that an amateur fighter like my son needed to see. A fighter that fights and has hard dedication to his sport, like Devin Haney, because that's how my son is. But he looks much more and has the charisma of a Ryan Garcia. It's a very interesting thing, right? Uh, my son does not care for Ryan. And I think the reason why my son doesn't care for Ryan is because a lot of people have told him, you sort of look like Ryan Garcia. And he's probably like, don't compare me to that guy. I'm my own man. And then he also sees how Ryan Garcia moves, right? Very charismatic. Everybody talks about him. He's quite popular. And my son, he's quite popular. Everybody likes him. And people do talk about him. Very similar. But my son, as a man, and his character and his demeanor, he's much more closer to how Devin Haney is. A fighter that's respectful. He's very obedient, hardworking. He doesn't make himself seem like a clown. He's always in the gym. And he's not too brash and outspoken. Straight shooter, my son. So I know he probably looks at Devin Haney's like, wow. And the funny thing is, he has a heck of a jab, just like Devin Haney. He moves very well. He's a very good fighter, very skillful. He's got a lot to work on. Don't get me wrong, he's an amateur. But where he's at, how fast he's developed, and what we're seeing in every single one of his outings, yeah, we're probably going to put him as a pro soon enough. If he doesn't become an orthodontist, because that's what I want him to do. I want him to fix teeth by way of braces, right? But maybe he can do both. Maybe he can fix teeth and break him at the same time. But we'll see. But I told all our fighters from the Rock Boxing Gym, you have to watch this fight, because you can be the gifted, talented, but lazy, charismatic fighter like Ryan Garcia is, or you can be the soft-spoken, humble, hardworking, and respectful fighter like Devin Haney, a guy who has accomplished some of the greatest feats in the sport of boxing, but people don't like him because he's not charismatic, or because his dad is bombastic and loud. Hey, I'm like that. But yet we have Ryan Garcia, who everybody loves, and he ain't done nothing in the sport of boxing. He's never fought in, well, up until yesterday, he had never fought in the champion, former, defending, otherwise. He's never had any good fights. Nobody ever says Ryan Garcia's name up there with the Lomachenko's, the Devin Haney's, the Shakur Stevens, not even the Camarón Cepedas, the Frank Martins. Somehow, Ryan Garcia gets so much leeway that nobody ever says, you know what? I would love to see Ryan take on Lomachenko. But whenever anybody brings up Lomachenko's name, everybody wants to see him. Shakur Stevens, Devin Haney, Tank, Cambosis, Cepeda, Rayo, everybody. Somehow, Ryan Garcia gets a pass. Somehow, Ryan Garcia is already a welterweight and nobody realizes it. He's fought in, what, 3 fights now at over 140, which makes him an official welterweight. But nobody ever calls him out there with the names such as Putsenis, Crawley, Mario Barrios, Jordanis Ugas, Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia. Well, Danny's 154 now, maybe 160, I think. He wants to take on Erislandy Lara. Nobody would ever say Ryan Garcia, Terence Crawford. Why does he get away with so much? Why is he so spoiled? Oh yeah, I forget. Guess Dad, $1 million smile. And of course, he's a Mexican American like us, and we always cheer for our own. Just, I don't know, guys. Are we giving him too much consideration because he's one of us? Not sure. Not sure. But I'll tell you one thing. If anybody asks me, who do you want your son to come out like? Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia? That's the toughest question you can ask me. Because as a man, I want my son to be more like Devin Haney. But as a professional, I would rather have him, I guess, have a career like Ryan's, where the world loves him and he amasses millions without taking any of the best fights out there. Just the easy path towards being a successful, wealthy fighter. Mr. Vince Vargas, he asks a good question. Does that Turkey guy allow women to fight? Just curious. So, if you've never seen a fight in Saudi Arabia, it's new to them. Yeah, I understand, Mr. Vargas, the reason you asked that question. Um, he has not had a female fight yet that I recall, and I've watched about 4 different events. I think maybe there was one, uh, but you wouldn't tell um, whether they approve or not, because one of the things about fights that take place in Saudi Arabia, Mr. Vargas, is that the Saudis are new to the world of boxing, right? So they don't know many of these fighters. And Mr. Turki Alalsheikh is bringing the best fighters of the world over to his backyard, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to show his people what the best fighters look like. And we know that the best fighters come in all colors, in all races, from all nations, right? So what that means is that these people are being introduced to these fighters that they don't know anything about because they're not from Saudi Arabia, right? So they're not from the start heavily invested in these fighters anyways, right? And they're also very serious individuals because, of course, the religion tends to have that connotation that they are very serious and dedicated to their spirituality and the religious practices. So you won't, when you imagine a Muslim from Saudi Arabia, you never imagine like a clown, right? Like a person that's just acting a fool or anything like that. No, you don't imagine that. Maybe you do, but I don't. I always imagine a person that's by the book, doesn't say too much, keeps it straight, keeps it moving, right? But when you're that kind of a person, you don't show too much emotion. So you have two things going on while those fights are happening that do not promote for very exciting events, right? So that these guys cannot easily cheer for these fighters because, one, they don't know who they are for the most part because boxing is pretty new to them, and two, they're already very strict, serious individuals to begin with that aren't just going to get rowdy, right? Now you bring in the women as a third element, as a third factor, and we know that women, they don't have as many rights as men do, right? Mr. Turki Ali Sheikh and the princeling of Saudi Arabia, his name is Mohammed bin Salman. He's apparently trying to modernize the country, so he's giving more freedom to women to do things such as drive and all of these things and partake in sports. So it's starting to change, but it's all new to them. It's still, like baby steps, right? So yes, does Turkey allow women to fight? It's starting to, but they don't know how to react to it yet, right? And I know this because WWE had a big, massive event in Saudi Arabia, and they brought these women fighters, these wrestlers, and they were doing their thing, but the guys just didn't really clap or get loud or rude or nothing like that. They were very quiet. But then again, when you saw the male wrestling matches, they were the same way. It's all new to them. They don't show too much emotion. So it makes for a very silent, otherwise pretty blase event. But that's okay, right? Because what happened last Saturday with the Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney fight? We had a very loud and talkative, a very chatty Patty, and Chris Mannix. And you know what Chris Mannix was doing? Chris Mannix just spent the whole 12-round fight giving rounds to Devin Haney. In fact, I think at the end of the fight, he had it a draw. Even though it seemed like you turned left and right, Devin Haney was getting dropped. Now, to be fair, Ryan Garcia did give up a lot of rounds, walking back and getting penalized. He got a point taken away, even though he dominated that round. So basically, negated that pointage. He got tired and wounded. So then, of course, Devin Haney started to pop him with jabs and twos. It was a very close fight. Had it not been for those knockdowns, one would easily have given that fight to Devin Haney, in my opinion, right? But there was those knockdowns. But the one thing that stood out is how a lot of people started to criticize Chris Mannix because he had the fight a draw. And every time he showed a scorecard, it seems like he was looking for ways to give Devin Haney rounds. Seemed controversial. So I guess what I'm saying is this. Do we really need to have a boxing event that's so rowdy and full of life when the commentators are getting the calls wrong? Or do we want a place that allows the punches to make the sound? Do you guys remember when we were living through the pandemic and then we had boxing events that were taking place in the backyard of Mr. Eddie Hearn or at Top Rank when it was just a studio and it was just a ring with like 5 camera guys and that was it? Everybody else was wearing a mask, and the only thing that was there in the ring was the third man with the mask, 2 fighters without, and the only thing you heard was punches. If you like hearing punches and don't care too much about the root rooting and the boo ya ya and the rah rah going on, you'll appreciate the fights in Saudi Arabia. But if you love people hollering and hooting and raising their arms and throwing things around and going crazy and hearing the boos and hearing the cheers, yeah, you're not gonna get that when fights take place in Saudi Arabia. Hey, I ask you, would you rather watch the fights or would you rather not watch the fights? Because these fights that Mr. Turki Alalsheikh just presented to us, Crawford, Israel Madrimov, Crawford versus Boots Ennis, Ruiz, Andy Ruiz, Baby Miller, Rayo, Pitbull. Those fights wouldn't likely happen in the United States. Why? Because of all the egos and the financial demands of all of these fighters. The only guy that can make their egos fly out the window and satisfy these fighters' financial demands, Mr. Turki Alalsheikh. And if Mr. Turki Alalsheikh wanted to bring all those fights to his backyard, guess what, Mr. Vince Vargas? I assure you, you and I were going to watch those fights. It might not be loud, it might not be a spirited event, but the fights sure are. And are we here because of the people in the backyard? Or are we here because of the people in the center of the ring? I know what I'm here for. But I do hope Mr. Turki Alalsheikh convinces Mr. Mohammed bin Salman to allow more women to fight. Why? Because one thing I love is when women fight. There's nothing more of a turn on for me than a sexy beast of war. And you tell me when the last time you saw a boring female fight. Oh yeah, I got the answer. Sorry about that. Any fight with Sky Nicholson. She says Shakur Stevens of female boxing. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you once again, maybe you can ponder this before you fall asleep in slumber, counting sheep. Does boxing have a judgment problem? Will six judges make for a better fight result? Less controversy. I ask you this also. What do you guys think about Turki Alalsheikh and what it means to the sport of boxing? And if you do want to comment, what did I miss this past weekend that I should be discussing? I mean, I can go back and watch those fights, you know, if you think they're worth it. But I would rather hear from you. I appreciate every single one of you hopping on here to hear me just talk your ears out. Mr. Vince Farkas, the homie Ricky, I appreciate your visit. David V, I appreciate you coming by. But yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the sport of boxing. And I, for one, don't think six judges make for a better result. And I think I agree with the homie Ricky and Mr. Vince Vargas. We boxing fans, we love the controversy. Do we not? Ladies and gentlemen, I bid you adieu. I hope you are well of health and sane of mind. But if not, guess what? Join the club. Until next time.